Welcome to part 2 of our paid search audit series. In the previous video, we talked about looking at conversion goals, making sure that an account is set up for success, and making sure that all of the budget and bidding strategies are in place to hit the client's stated targets. If you're interested in that video, you can check it out right here, or right here. It's up here somewhere. You guys will find it. I'm pretty confident. Today we want to take the next step in our audit process, and that's looking at campaign structure. Now, campaign structure has been debated in the PPC space for well over a decade now, and we're not here to espouse one structure over another. All we want to do is make sure that whatever structure is being used will lend itself to seeing the success that the client wants to see out of the account. So for this video, we're going to go through a couple examples of campaign structure and just talk about some of the questions we might have and some things we might flag in a deliverable document. I want to start off by reiterating something that I just said in the intro, is that the goal of auditing the campaign structure is not to find the right campaign structure. There really is no right campaign structure when it comes to paid search campaigns. There are just some that will help you achieve your goals and others that will hinder you from doing that. But there's plenty of ways that you can set up campaigns that will be right, if you will. It really just comes down to what you manage the best and what makes the most sense. So we're mostly just looking for red flags here. During this process, what we're trying to do is understand the structure that's in place. Again, whatever structure you manage best and works well for your brain is probably the one that's going to work the best. But that means that if it works well for your brain, it might take a little bit of time for Joe and I to get our heads wrapped around why things are the way they are. So we're trying to understand the structure to start. And then once we understand it, we're trying to decide if it'll actually help or hinder the account from achieving the goals that were stated in our initial discussions around why the account isn't performing and why we're auditing it in the first place. Now to do this, we're going to take a little different approach than what we normally do. Usually we'll be looking at accounts in Google Ads, but that made it so we had to blur lots of things out. You couldn't really understand what was happening. So what I've done instead is I've carried over the campaign structures for 3 accounts that we're going to look at into Google Ads Editor, and I've anonymized them as well as I can so that you can walk through a real account structure even if you don't exactly know what they're advertising or who the brand is. But I say all that just to say that you're probably going to see some errors like we see down here in this shared library piece. There's going to be images and this kind of stuff that's going to throw some errors that are just part of the problem because I copied these campaigns into an account where they don't exist. So just ignore the errors because this is just for sake of example. The first account we're going to take a look at is actually the same one that we looked at in the first video where we talked about campaign goals, budget, and bidding strategies and making sure that those aligned with the stated goals. So some of this might seem familiar, but we're going to look at it through a different lens. And just like last time, the first thing that stands out is going to be these 3 brand campaigns up at the top. Now, the first thing I'm going to think is, why on earth do you have 3 brand campaigns? What's going on here? So at this point is where we're going to dig in a little bit, try to understand what's happening. For just brand in general, we've got one ad group. It has just brand terms in it. I can confirm that by looking at the keywords that are actually in here. It has 15 keywords in the single ad group because we can see that down below while we have that campaign and ad group selected. So that's not too terribly many keywords. It's a number of different variants, but that's okay. And then if we come to the second one, we can see that there's the same brand keyword set. But now if I check into the keywords, which I'm not going to do because then we'd have to blur it out, we'll notice that they're all broad match. Now, while we don't recommend breaking out campaigns by match type anymore, simply because of how the Google Ads match types work, this actually falls right into the strategy that we would use for testing broad match in an account that hasn't used it yet. If you're interested in learning more about our approach to broad match keywords, you can check out the video at the top of the screen right now. But overall, this might have seemed like something that didn't make sense, but after a little further investigation, we now understand what they're going for, and we get the fact that these 2 campaigns are definitely separated just because they're trying to test out broad match. Now the third option we have down here still has all the same brand keywords in place, but if I open this up a little bit, and if you'll remember from the previous video, this campaign has different conversion goals in the mix. So this is going to be a campaign where it effectively is a test against this brand campaign up at the top, but we're testing different conversion actions and different optimization goals. In that previous video, I called out the different performance between the two, so we might have some suggestions going on there, but from a structure point of view, this makes sense. I understand why it's here, even if I don't think it's performing as well as it could. So no red flags when it comes to structure. It's all based on performance. So that's enough for brand. Let's go ahead and close these back down. If we keep working our way down the list, the next campaign that we're going to see is competitors. I am a big proponent of competitors being in their own separate campaign, each having their own ad group, that sort of thing. So let's see if that's how they have their campaign set up. They sure do. Competitor 1 has its ad group, competitor 2 has a next ad group, and everything is broken out so that things are separate from brand and non-brand, and the competitors are separate from each other. Now, each of these has 10 keywords and then another 10 keywords. So overall, that looks fine to me. Competitor terms just tend to perform drastically different than other keywords in your account, whether brand or non-brand, because of the competitive nature of them. So if you're going to advertise on competitor terms, you need to be aware of that and make sure that you're taking whatever performance you have from them with a grain of salt, because they're just not going to do the same as other keywords. If you're interested in our strategies around competitor terms, you can check out the video at the top of the screen right now, and we'll walk you through the decisions that you need to make to decide if you want to advertise on competitors or not. But from a structure standpoint, this looks great. Now I want to focus on these 3 campaigns that are focused on different types of provider terms. You'll remember from the last video that this business is advertising to service providers as well as the end users of those services. So all of these terms, based on the campaign naming convention, are directed at providers, and there are just different types of keywords that are in there. So if we open these up, take a quick look, each has a couple ad groups. They have 6 and 4 keywords in the first one. That seems to be fine. Then with this campaign, we've got 8 keywords, 4 keywords, another 4, 6, and 12. All that seems to be fine. And both of these have just 2 and 5 ad groups. This next one has 7 ad groups, it looks like. Overall, that's fine. I'm going to start looking at the keyword counts. Overall, we have pretty low keyword counts. 18 is getting a little higher. 34, now we're talking. That's getting a little higher. Let's see what the other ones are. This one has 2 keywords in it, then 4, then 2. Okay. Ad group 4 is where we've got a ton of keywords. So at this point, with 34 keywords in a single ad group, especially when other ones have only 2, normally at this point, I would take a look at these keywords, understand if there's good segmentation between them. Are they just different ways of saying the same thing and honestly do belong in the same ad group? Or were there just a bunch of non-brand keywords that got chucked in here, whether it was because somebody didn't know where else to put them, they got too lazy to make a new ad group, or was there some sort of recommendation that was applied from Google's recommendations? They don't always do a good job of suggesting new ad groups, and they sometimes can bucket keywords together that don't really match. This would be an area that I would check out. 34 keywords is starting to get a little high for me, so I would take a look at that. But overall, the rest of it looks pretty good. And then I would just do the same type of check for all of these other campaigns. So this one has 10 ad groups in it. That's not too many for me. This campaign has just 1 ad group and does look like it has 5 keywords. So I might take a look into that and understand why we needed to segment out user and provided type 1 keywords where there's 15 ad groups, even if only 3 are active. Why did this one need its own campaign with 1 ad group? Why couldn't it just live in here? I might try and figure that out. And while that might seem like splitting hairs to combine this ad group into this campaign, you'll remember from the previous video, we're trying to also make sure that this makes sense based on the goals that are in place. So if this campaign has high conversion volume, but this type 2 campaign has lower conversion volume and it's using a smart bidding strategy, if this ad group and set of keywords can blend into the type 1 terms, you're going to have a better chance of seeing good performance from the keywords in this ad group if the data is combined with all of the keywords that are performing well in this campaign. It's just data consolidation, and it tends to work a little bit better that way. So overall, I would say account 1 looks pretty good. So let me pull up some campaigns for a second account. Just like account 1, account 2 has some pretty clear naming conventions when it comes to the campaigns. So we have a brand campaign. We'll open that up. This looks a little different. So we have a brand ad group by itself, but then we have a brand plus integration 1 and a brand plus integration 2. And that's because this is a software brand and it will integrate, as you can tell, with other platforms that are out there. So they not only have their core brand terms, but they also have different brands that it can integrate with in their own ad group. I think that's perfect. A lot of times people will break out their brand terms plus reviews or brand terms plus pricing, something like that, in different ad groups in their brand campaign. I think that's fine, especially if you're trying to adjust your ad copy, potentially even your landing page to match those terms. I didn't anonymize this far enough to be able to show you guys what the ads are, but I can tell you that this brand ad group takes people just to a regular conversion page, while these integration ad groups and keywords take users to landing pages that are dedicated to those integrations. So this part looks great. If they did not have those integrations called out in either the ad copy or the landing page, that would be something that I would flag. Structure-wise, I think it absolutely makes sense to have them broken out, but then take advantage of the fact that they're in different ad groups. Even if you don't have landing pages dedicated to it, write new ad copy that leans into the integrations that are in there. That would be the only suggestion I'd have, but this account looks good. Next, we have 2 campaigns that are dedicated just to content. They're focused on ebooks 1 and 2. And as I mentioned, I had to anonymize this a little bit. These are 2 very different topics. So having these in separate campaigns makes total sense because they're very different assets. They talk about different things. But you'll notice if I go into the ad groups themselves, if I open these up, the way that they have the keywords separated into ad groups is based on the end user who might be searching for those terms. They've used their persona building to put together terms that users would search for, terms managers would search for, financial people would search for, as well as CEOs. And each of these ad groups has different keyword counts. So CEO is at 2, finance is at 18, managers are at 7, and users are at 6. I don't really have a problem with this structure. It might not be the way I would do it because I don't usually break search campaigns down by personas, but for this person, it makes sense. They do speak to all the individual needs for these different personas within the ad copy and landing pages. So even though, again, it might not be the way I would do it, I think this looks great. It seems to be working pretty well, and there's nothing that's hindering the performance of these ebook campaigns simply because the structure is a little bit different than I would normally use. For ebook 2, I would just want to make sure that the number of keywords in here makes sense. So we've got 8, 13, 10, and 9. All that looks pretty good. So we'll close these down. And the last 2 campaigns are around the solution, so the non-brand keywords. And here's where things might start to get a little strange, because I would say the Solution 1 campaign with product type terms in one ad group, benefit type keywords in the second, and problems in the third makes sense. But then down in the second campaign, we're starting to look at quite a number of ad groups. We've got 17 ad groups, and I would be curious if some of these make sense and kind of need to be broken out this far. Benefit statements, you have 6 different versions. Solution keywords, you have 8 different versions. Problems, you've got them in 3. I would personally check a lot of these just to make sure that we've got things that make sense. Again, I'm going to check the number of keywords in a lot of these ad groups. For problems, we have 2 keywords, 4 keywords, and 2 keywords. Maybe those don't need to be broken out into separate ad groups. They might need to be, but maybe they don't. At that point, I would probably let my gut instinct be the driver of whether I suggest combining those or not. And if anything, I might make the suggestion to combine them, but say that it's not mandatory. It would just be the way we would do it, and then let the client decide if they want to roll that out or not. I would do the same thing for the solutions and benefits keywords just to see, but for now, you get what the process looks like. And I actually want to switch to the last account that we're looking at, because so far, I've shown you campaigns that have a pretty clean structure, and we might have some flags to call out, but not a ton. This one is where we start to deviate a little bit. So although they're not in alphabetical order over here, let's start with the brand campaign. Again, we see that we've got a brand campaign and 2 non-brand campaigns. So at a high level, that seems reasonable. Well, if we open this up, in the brand campaign, we actually have brand terms in one ad group. We have non-brand industry terms in this ad group. This one has more non-brand industry terms. And then this last ad group actually has more branded terms in it when you look at the actual keywords. Again, I can't show you those because then it would give the account away. But this is something that just seems like a mess. There's brand terms and non-brand mixed in the same ad group. There's no real delineation as to why there are additional brand terms in this ad group and they don't live in this ad group. There's no real reason for it. There's no difference in the type of keywords. There's no integration type terms. There's no match type differences. They're just different versions of the brand term that should probably all be together. So here I would have the suggestion of removing all of the non-brand terms into the other campaigns and combining all of the brand terms into a single ad group. There's currently no benefit to having things broken out. If anything, it just builds out the campaign structure further, segments the data further so that either bidding strategies or reporting becomes more difficult. And if this campaign uses smart bidding strategies, it's going to have a hard time performing well when it's going after brand terms and non-brand terms. They just tend to perform so differently that it doesn't really make sense to have these all together. So that's my first red flag, is having all of these terms together broken out too far. But then in the other campaigns that we have here, we can see the non-brand terms in the type 1 campaign, and there are 9 ad groups in this campaign, as you can see down here. And then if I open up non-brand type 2, there's just one ad group, and because of the way I've named this, it's just a single non-brand keyword. Now for this one, sometimes there are some industry terms that are effectively the name of a product, and maybe you have that all mixed together and there's just one keyword that really takes off and it needs to be by itself. That's fine. At this point, I would look into performance and understand why this keyword is broken out by itself, and then determine if it made sense for it to be combined in the other non-brand campaign, because maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it needs a lot of really specific negative keywords for it, but if we look down here, it's only got 5 negative keywords. That's probably not the main reason. So at this point, before suggesting that this needs to be rolled in somewhere, I would determine why this is here and then make a suggestion based on that. But the bigger issue is going to be this non-brand campaign over here. If I pull this up here, we've got all the ad groups on the right. You can see here that there are a handful of non-brand industry terms that are showing up in these ad groups. And overall, each of these looks fine, but I've got a couple issues here. First of all, there are competitors in this non-brand campaign. As we talked about, in my opinion, that's a no-no. Competitors do not perform the same as non-brand terms, so those should be broken out in their own campaign. And then lastly, this is just a pet peeve of mine. The ad group that's selected up here at the top, ad group 2 blue, I actually didn't even change the name of that one. That's just what it's named in the account. And that is a terrible ad group name. That doesn't mean anything to anyone from the outside. Get your naming convention buttoned up. Make sure that you know what all of your ad groups are and have everything sorted out so that it actually makes sense when you look at it. So now that we've gone through a few examples, you probably have a pretty good idea of what we're actually looking for when it comes to account structure audits. We're looking for under or over segmentation in the campaigns, ad groups, and keywords. And we're looking for logical breakdowns between all of those different levels. As I mentioned earlier, rather than looking for things that are right or wrong with the structure, because again, structure isn't as black or white as some other things where it can be objectively right or wrong. We're really just trying to make sure that things make sense in the account structure and it's not hurting the performance of the account. We already talked about some in the examples that we just went through, but here are some of the common red flags that Joe and I see when we audit accounts. We tend to see lots of brand, competitor, and non-brand keywords mixed together so that it's really difficult to tell them apart and segment the performance. We see way too many or too few keywords in ad groups. Single keyword ad groups should be used pretty rarely at this point just because of the way all the machine learning works, but you also don't want to have hundreds of keywords in a single ad group, which makes it difficult to understand what is and isn't working. We come across a lot of accounts that have maybe 5 to 10 campaigns, but each one has one single ad group and tons of keywords just chucked in there. So that's something that we commonly are talking about, trying to find some reasonable segmentation. But we also find a lot of accounts, which is this last bullet here, that has campaign segmentation without a clear distinction in the keywords or goals. Now, we didn't see many of those today, but one of the things that's usually a giveaway of that is when there's not a big difference in the keywords across campaigns, and they're using the same ad copy landing pages, and goals. At that point, we might start to talk about maybe the need to consolidate them together to lean more into an automated bidding strategy or to keep all the like performance together so we're not segmenting the data. But again, that's going to be a judgment call on your part, whether or not you call that out and suggest making changes, or just flag it as something to think about when you're conducting your own audits. As I've said a number of times, there's no right or wrong campaign structure. And we actually have a different video that'll walk you through a number of different types of campaign structure. If you're interested in that, you can check out the video at the top of the screen right now. That walkthrough might help you understand what you're looking for, what might be red flags, and what might not be, if you don't have as much experience. But overall, I hope this rundown and examples have given you an idea of what we tend to look for with campaign structure in audits and help you feel more confident in making suggestions in your deliverable documents. If you've got any additional questions about campaign structure in audits or anything else about auditing paid search campaigns, leave us a note in the comments below. Thanks for watching our video. We really appreciate it. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up below. If you really liked it, maybe think about subscribing to the Paid Media Pros YouTube channel and you'll get alerted every time a new video drops.
If you really liked it, you can help support the channel by checking out some of the t-shirts that we're wearing on our merch shelf, as well as looking at the Super Thanks button.